Hello and welcome to a very special Viking.TV interview, which I hope you're going to enjoy and find as fascinating as I have found it to prepare and research it, read up on it and binge on the videos. Because today we're celebrating the launch of what is basically a time machine. In fact, it's really, I suppose, a backwards in time viewer, the biggest and most complex telescope ever made by man and then sent into space. You must remember the launch of the Hubble telescope. In fact, last year, we met one of the astronauts, Kathy Sullivan, who took it up into orbit aboard the Space Shuttle Discovery. That was back in 1990. Almost immediately, Hubble's images were spectacular and changed the face of astrophysics. In fact, NASA says no image has revolutionized the way we understand the universe as much as this one. It's called Hubble's Deep Field image. In it are some 3,000 distant galaxies, varying in their stages of evolution because you're looking back in time to when they formed. But science, of course, doesn't stop still. And in the whole human history of looking up at the skies, astronomers have always wanted to build a bigger and a better telescope. And now we have it, and it is poised to deliver. Let me hand over the story to the one and only Carl Sagan.
We have uncovered wonders undreamt by our ancestors who first speculated on the nature of those wandering lights in the night sky. We've crossed the solar system and sent ships to the stars. But we continue to search. We can't help it. A central element of the human future lies far beyond the Earth. If we crave some cosmic purpose, then let us find ourselves a worthy goal.
The James Webb Space Telescope. It certainly does make your spine tingle, doesn't it? And of course, they've been building it for a long time now. If you look at some of the pictures of the precise way, the incredible engineering that has gone into building that amazing telescope, well, it does make your spine tingle. It's that very word beyond, looking beyond, isn't it? There it is in the lab, and now it is up in space. But now the James Webb Space Telescope will be able to look beyond Hubble. Its engineering has been described as insanely genius, I think they mean. And when you learn, as we will in the next hour, how they put it together and got complex systems to work over 1 million miles away on the other side of the sun, you'll be confounded and astounded too. So let's meet one of those insanely genius people who has worked on both the Hubble and now the James Webb telescopes from NASA. Mike Menzel, Mission Systems Engineer. Hello to you. It's wonderful to see you.
Hello, Anne. Thank you for having me.
Oh, well, it's wonderful, as I said, to be able to talk to somebody so intrinsically involved with this amazing telescope. 30 years of hard work from you. How long have you been working on it?
About 25 years myself.
And you've been involved for so long. When you actually saw it launch, and now we know it's up there successfully, how proud are you?
Well, I have to admit that during the launch itself, most of us were very focused because we knew that there were a lot of challenges still ahead. And, you know, during the launch, it was a little less emotional than people might have thought because of that focus. But I have to confess, a couple of days after we deployed everything and after it was assembled and, you know, deployed correctly, I looked back at the video of the launch and I did get very proud and I did realize that, you know, the magnitude of what we had accomplished over these 25 years.
Yeah, I mean, to see that telescope go up inside the Ariane rocket, it was an amazing thing for most of us to see. For you, it must have been a bit like, I don't know, the birth of a child or something. Because, and when was the last time, for instance, you ever had a holiday or went home for the weekend or just put your feet up? You must have been working on it for so long, particularly in the last couple of years.
Myself and my whole team, yeah. We've had weekends, but I can't say that I've had a good night's sleep in many years.
We'll talk in a moment about how you even got the telescope inside the rocket. But first, bring us up to date. Where is it now and what's it doing?
Well, right now it's about 1.3 million kilometers away from the Earth. As of yesterday, we just completed our last mid-course correction, and that's just to fine-tune the energy a little. So we're actually going to fall into the orbit that we want around that L2 point. The telescope is fully deployed, everything deployed and latched the way we wanted it to. And I've told folks that, on Christmas Day, we gave a present, but there was some assembly required. And over the last couple of weeks, we've been assembling it. It's assembled now, and we're going to begin to start tuning the telescope in a week or two and turning on the instruments.
So what is L2?
L2 is the second Lagrange point. It's a point on the other side of the Earth from the sun. And it's a place where the gravity of the Earth and the gravity of the sun combine in such a way that we can have a stable point out there where if we put a spacecraft out or near it, that spacecraft will follow the Earth around the sun every 365 days. So in essence, it's about 1 million miles away from the Earth. And it's a nice, you might say it's going out to the country where there's no stray light. And we can put a telescope there and it will stay in that position and follow the Earth around the sun every 365 days.
But the telescope at the moment is fully deployed.
That is correct.
Ready to go. When will it start the search? For what? Where do you point it first?
Well, that's actually a very guarded secret by the scientists. There's only a couple of scientists that know what the first object will be. And the last one they'd ever want to tell that to is myself and the engineers, because I'm one of the engineers that knows a little bit about astronomy. So they're keeping that a very guarded secret. But I will be able to say that I'm 100% certain that that first image or those first images will amaze and astound people. They're being picked to do just that.
And will they, for us ordinary folk, will they be images like what we have got used to being seen from Hubble? Will they be color images, or will they only be understandable by people like you?
Oh, no. They're being picked to be images. The public paid a lot of money for this telescope, and we're going to make sure that we show it off and that we show that, this thing is a very, very capable science instrument.
Of course, we don't know what we're going to expect from it, though. That first image, will it be like the Hubble, only clearer, more of it, much more focused, or could it be something that we don't expect at all?
No, I think it will be a little bit of all of that. As I said, they would never tell me what the first image would be, because they know I'm being interviewed in places like this. Yeah. So they would just not do that. But I suspect it's going to be an image that will highlight the capabilities of this telescope. And this, as you said, is the largest telescope ever put into space. It's a highly capable instrument, and it will be something that will have a lot of the ooh-ah factor in it. I can guarantee you that.
That's terrific. You are a mission systems engineer. What is that? What is your role?
I'm essentially the lead of the technical engineering team. And over the course of these 25 years, that meant I talk to the astronomers. I find out what it is they want. I translate that into a language that engineers can understand, which we call requirements. And after we settle on what the requirements are, we start to design the system. And in designing a system, that means things like, well, we decide what launcher to use. We decide what ground system to use. We decide how big the telescope is, how cold it should be, what kind of science instruments we should have on it. And after we make that decision, I do the more mundane things like divvy up the mass, allocate power, figure out how to point it. Next, we do analysis to find out if what we designed is truly going to work. And then while we're building it in the final stage, I'm in charge of leading what we call verification. And that is proof that what we built is actually flight worthy and will work. And during this part of the mission, which we call operations, I'm basically sitting back and watching the ops team work. And if there's a problem, then I get involved and we try to come up with a solution that's the best solution for the entire system.
How long does it take for a signal, a control signal, to get from mission control on Earth 1 million miles to where it is now?
Let's see, it's about 4 seconds.
Ooh, I was expecting almost longer than that.
Oh, no. The distance between us and the moon is about 1 light second, and we're about 4 times farther than the moon.
And so far, has everything clicked into place as it should?
They have. We've been very fortunate, and that's very gratifying because, as you know, and as some of your listeners will know, deploying things in space is a very risky business. There's a lot that can go wrong, and we were very relieved to see everything work as well as it did.
We're going to look at a video in a few minutes which will explain all the deployment issues. But I wonder if you can explain a concept that some people might find difficult to understand. And this is what Hubble was all about, and certainly what this jwst is all about, is about the idea, the concept of the further you look into space, you are looking back in time. And how far back in time might the new telescope be able to look?
Well, first, whenever you see anything, you're not seeing it as it is, you're seeing it as it was. Because light is extremely fast, but it has a finite velocity, and it takes a finite amount of time to get from A to B. So as an example, when you go out tonight, if you look at the moon, you're seeing it not as it is, but as it was about a second ago. If you look at the sun, you're seeing it not as it is, but as it was about 8 minutes ago. Go out tonight and look at the stars. The average star that you can see with your naked eye is somewhere between 4,000 and 3,000 light years away. So some of those stars that you're seeing them as they were when the Roman Empire ruled the world. Galaxies are millions of miles away, are millions of light years away. So you're seeing them as they were millions of years ago. And finally, the farthest thing that we've seen to date with Hubble is approximately about 13 billion light years away. So you're seeing that as it was 13 billion years ago. And to put that in perspective, most astronomers believe that the universe itself is about 13.7 billion years old. So we designed James Webb to see the very first galaxies that turned on after that Big Bang. And they would have turned on, that light would have been traveling to us for probably about 13.5 billion years.
When I was discussing the fact that I was going to interview about this, one of my sisters said, does that mean we are going to see the Big Bang?
Well, in a sense, by the way, we already have seen the Big Bang. The Big Bang was a fireball. And after that fireball expanded and started to cool, we saw what would be considered to be the surface of that explosion. And that's called the cosmic microwave background. And in fact, the person who sits next to me at Goddard Space Flight Center, John Mather, won a Nobel Prize for seeing and measuring that the temperature of that fireball.
And of course, this telescope also has the ability, I gather, to see through dust clouds to view new galaxies. So it can pierce right through any of the haze. How does it do that?
Well, it does that because of the nature of infrared light. Infrared light has a longer wavelength than what you and I see invisible. And because it has a longer wavelength, small particles of dust don't disturb it the way it would disturb and scatter visible light. So being that the light isn't scattered by that much, infrared light just goes through it unimpeded. And that means that we can see through dust clouds and see by peering into those dust clouds, we can see the stars that are being born in those dust cocoons.
So I guess you will be able to see things, hopefully, in greater focus as well. What I'm getting at is if there is any evidence of life, could you see it?
That's a little bit arguable, but it is my hope as an engineer that, what we can theoretically detect is what we call biomarkers, elements and compounds in the atmospheres of some of the 4,000 odd exoplanets that we know, planets around other stars. Compounds are things like oxygen, carbon dioxide, water, methane, that are substances that are either made by life or necessary for life as we know it. So when we look at these exoplanets, there's a very good chance we'll have the sensitivity to see these signatures of these compounds. And if we do, that will be the first evidence that these planets may either support or have life on them.
Or supported and had life on them.
That is correct.
So far back in time.
That is correct.
Gosh, I know it's everyday science to you, but it's quite mind-boggling, I think, to most of us. Let's talk about this as a feat of engineering as well. I think we can all see that just from if you look at pictures of how this telescope has been built, created, put together, and the hazards, of course, we must understand of launching such a delicate instrument into space. Just how difficult has that task been?
It's been extremely difficult. You realize that you have to, on one level, we have to make the telescope deployable, foldable, and it has to unfold. And unfortunately, that means that a lot of things on it have to be floppy and not as rigid as you might want. But by the same token, these things also have to survive the stresses and forces of a launch. That has been a very difficult engineering challenge for us. And then aside from the launch, deploying things in zero G, especially things like tennis court size sunshields that are like the sheets on the bed that can flop and go into places where you don't want them to, has been extremely challenging. And making sure that, at any point in the deployment, we know exactly where these things are and we keep them from going in places that we don't want them to, has been a real challenge.
NASA has made a video which includes yourself and your colleagues on it called 29 Days on the Edge. First of all, why is it called that?
Well, because the final part of the final time-sensitive maneuver that we have was at the what we call the MCC2, Mid-Course Correction 2 maneuver, that we actually did yesterday. So from here on in, we've declared, hey, the telescope is put together, the critical maneuvers are done, and now we'll cool down and start doing the more, we'll start aligning the telescope and turning on the instruments and calibrating them. So it was the first 29 days that had some very, very unique challenges. Although I don't want to, it is a bit of a misnomer because the next couple of 30-odd, next 3 months really, or 2 months, we're going to be actually realigning and refocusing the telescope remotely from a distance of 1 million miles. And that's never been done before. I tell people that we've taken a perfectly great telescope, a world-class 6-meter telescope. We've made it, we've aligned it, we've focused it, we've proved it worked. And then what do? We bust it up, fold it up, and now we got to reassemble it on orbit. So it's been reassembled, but now we got to refocus it and realign it. And that's not a trivial operation, but I think that the team that we have to do that is very, very well versed. They're chomping at the bit to get started on that.
How you ever got it inside the capsule that goes inside the rocket, I don't know, but that's the first part of this video. So let's have a look at it now. How you got that amazingly beautiful telescope to fold up and fit inside a rocket. Let's have a look.
This is the largest primary mirror, the largest sunshield, and the most powerful space telescope ever built. And yet, this large telescope needs to fit inside a 5.4 meter diameter rocket fairing. That's the largest fairing size available on any rocket, and it's the fairing size on our ride to space. The Ariane 5, provided by the European Space Agency, is one of the world's most powerful rockets. To cheat the fairing size limit, we built Webb to fold, like origami, to fit inside the rocket fairing.
And this brings us to our most challenging part of this mission, unfolding it in space.
Think of what you're doing. You're taking this extraordinarily delicate, precise, state-of-the-art scientific instrument, you're slapping it on a rocket, and for the next 8 minutes, the explosion from that rocket is following you into outer space. Vibrating, shaking you. Everything that goes into outer space has to live through this environment and work once it gets there without having someone come to fix it.
Yeah, because it is well beyond the reach of any astronaut, isn't it? Nobody's going to go out there with a spanner and a toolkit.
Well, I was joking around with people saying if it didn't unfold, I'd volunteer.
It's a long way to go and not very nice by the sound of it. Tell me about your team. I think a lot of people watching will agree. Whenever we see pictures from NASA of things being assembled, we always see men in sort of, it looks like hazmat suits, but certainly full PPI, looking as though it's done in an incredibly precise laboratory, in those sort of laboratory conditions. Why? And how is it done? And who are these amazing people who create it?
Well, first, the team is an international collaboration. I think you know that. The European Space Agency donated the rocket, the Ariane 5, and created and designed two of the instruments, the near-infrared spectrometer and the mid-infrared instrument. And then the Canadian Space Agency made the fine guidance sensor and NIRISS, the near-infrared imaging and slitless spectrograph. All those people that you see, the technicians that you see, are engineers and technicians, and we have to keep everything as clean as possible for some obvious reasons, and then for some not so obvious reasons. First, it's a telescope. You want to keep it clean. You want to keep it dust-free, because any dust that you get on the mirrors or in the optics detracts from that precious light that you're trying to get that's been traveling to us for 13.5 billion years. The other thing dust does is it scatters light. I mean, anyone that's rode to work with a dirty windshield knows that it's not only the light that's blocked, but you get glare and you get, things that just make it hard to see. The not so obvious things are, when we carry dust and other things into space, that can detract or degrade some of the precise deployment mechanisms that we have. God forbid you get a piece of something bad stuck in a mechanism and you don't deploy. And then finally, some of the things that those technicians are wearing are called ground straps. They make sure that static electricity will never zap one of the critical pieces of electronics that will be flown into outer space, and you don't want to find out that you zapped something when it's a million miles away.
My goodness, yes, these are things that most of us would never think of. The precision of those beautiful mirrors. It does look so beautiful as well. I mean, as an engineer, are you aware of that you're not just an engineer, you're an artist?
Well, I don't know how much of an artist I am, but I do know I'm an engineer, and I do know that, yes, those mirrors are a thing of beauty no matter what.
Well, one thing we all at Viking wanted to ask is, if you look at a picture like that, is that light enhanced just to make it look beautiful, or are the colors like that in the lab?
Well, there is a little bit of enhancement, and I'm not going to talk about how our expert photographers do it. But the truth is, it does look like that to me when I was near those mirrors. They look like that. They're actually gold plated. They have a very thin layer of gold on them, because gold is what you tend to use for an infrared telescope. And yeah, those colors are pretty accurate.
It looks wonderful. It does. And the job it has to do, it's so far away, as we said, beyond the reach of any astronaut with, a spanner. So it's got to work. And that is the major problem. You were talking about a number of deployments that you have to be able to carry out, the number of signals you have to give it, triggers for things to work at exactly the right time. How many in all?
Well, I get asked that question a lot. First, in terms of how many deployments, it depends on how you count what you call a deployment. But we say there's about 50 major deployments, and there are 178 release mechanisms, and they all had to release. And they were all what we would call a single point failure, meaning if that mechanism did not release, we would have a problem, a bad problem. And thankfully, and this is why we all have been getting good night's sleeps lately, all 178 of those release mechanisms released.
I mean, congratulations. Just that alone with your team, that must be such a relief for a start.
Yes, it is.
Let's have a look at the second or the second clip of that video, which describes exactly those sort of deployments and the intrinsic nature of them and the importance of them, and the way that they have been, although extremely challenging, so far so good. Let's have a look at this.
The Webb Observatory has 50 major deployments, 50 depending on how you categorize them, and 178 release mechanisms must work to deploy those 50 parts. Every single one of them must work. Unfolding Webb is hands down the most complicated spacecraft activity we've ever done. Then again, nothing about Webb is easy. We've never done any of this before. There's nothing simple about sending anything into space. You can't do it without taking risks.
This mission is squarely in new spacecraft territory. Webb is the perfect example of science desire driving engineering capability to new frontiers. Webb's unique design was born from reasoned engineering to accomplish its science goals.
Here's the plan. Shortly after launch, we unfold Webb's solar panel for power and our Huygens antenna for communication. About 12 hours later, we have an important engine firing that sends Webb on the proper course towards its orbital destination, about 1 million miles away. That's where Webb will do its science. Webb will be moving so fast, it passes the moon's orbit in 1.5 days, half the time it took Apollo astronauts to reach lunar orbit. First, we lower the sunshield pallet, then raise Webb's primary mirror and instruments away from the sunshield. The solar wind will push us around with the sunshield open, so we'll unfold a trim tab to help keep us stable.
We got these huge, iconic, golden segmented mirrors that will help us deliver amazing new images from the cosmos. But in some ways, the sunshield is a lot more complicated, and it's just as essential. Without it, nothing works.
Here we've got 5 sunshield layers, or approximately 8,900 square feet, almost the size of 3 tennis courts, of very thin Kapton material, about 1 to 2 thousandths of an inch thick. Making them go where you want them to go in 0G is extremely challenging.
Mike, when I first heard that there was this problem in making sure that the whole thing could cool down enough to do its job properly, I thought, well, outer space is very, very cold. What's the problem? But it's because of where it is in relation to the sun, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, outer space is very, very cold, but you're bathed in you're bathed by James Webb is bathed by 200,000 watts of solar radiation. And then to boot, we have about 2,000 watts of onboard energy. So those are good heat sources. And even so, being in outer space, you receive that energy and you turn it into heat. So we had that large sunshield that takes that 200,000 watts of solar radiation and only allows about 0.02 watts to get through. So I tell people, if it were suntan lotion, you would say it had an SPF of 10 million.
I see. Well, that really shows how important it is. But again, it's something that has to be lightweight and foldable because it has to get inside that rocket to start with. So again, a whole new problem for all of the engineers.
See, now you're talking like the engineers. You're talking exactly like we did 25 years ago.
Yeah. How are we going to get it? How something so delicate that's got to fold out so big, and you've got to get it into that tiny capsule. But did you already, I mean, with Hubble's not the same though, is it? Didn't have really the same sort of problem.
No, because Hubble sees in the same type of light that you and I see in. So Hubble didn't necessarily have to be cold. When you want to look in the infrared light, you don't want the telescope to glow brighter than the objects it's looking at. And you and I right now are glowing in the infrared because we're at room temperature. So to make sure the telescope didn't glow brighter than the stars we want to see, we had to make it cold, very cold, only about 55 degrees above absolute zero.
So you've got to have the sunshield. So all of that work, as you say, 25 years ago, was going into how do we get a sunshield that will be efficient and that will be foldable and incredibly lightweight. And you've done it. It's absolutely astonishing. We've got the next bit of the video, which shows exactly how the sunshield deploys all those little mechanisms that have to work absolutely perfectly. And it has done as well. Let's have a look at this last bit of the video.
The concept is simple, but there is nothing simple about the design or operation, especially when you get to space. Webb's sunshield assembly includes 140 release mechanisms, approximately 70 hinge assemblies, 8 deployment motors, bearings, springs, gears, about 400 pulleys, and 90 cables totaling 1,312 feet. All this just to keep the sunshield under control as it unfolds. First, we release these special restraints that protect the sunshield during launch. They roll out of the way, but not all the way until we are ready to deploy a side. Next, we release a set of covers over the core region. Now comes the critical point. All 107 sunshield release mechanisms need to fire on cue. 107. They free the 5 sunshield layers, allowing them to extend as the mid-booms deploy.
Sunshield fully deployed, we start setting up the optics. First, the secondary mirror is extended and locked into place, and a special radiator behind Webb is extended, which helps further lower the temperature of the science instruments. Finally, we open the primary mirror's wings and lock them in place. With that done, Webb is in its final configuration, but we're not done yet.
After 47 deployments, and accomplishing the hardest spacecraft unfolding NASA has ever done, Webb still won't be ready for science.
While the instruments cool, we'll control motors behind each of Webb's 18 mirror segments, a secondary mirror, and the fine steering mirror located inside the center of the primary mirror. We'll precisely align the mirror segments to form a perfect mirror. Then, Webb will be ready to explore the cosmos.
And explore the cosmos, I hope it gets on with very quickly. If you could explain, could you the whole idea, the idea that you've got the hexagonal mirrors? Are they hexagonal? Yes, they are.
Yes.
The beautiful gold mirrors, and the one in the center is black, or is it hollow?
No, that's actually hollow. There's what would look like a nose cone in the center. And the light beam that bounces off that small mirror in the front, we call it the secondary, passes through a hole in that nose cone, and then gets further focused by another mirror, and then finally brought to the instruments themselves.
I see. As I said, it's a very beautiful structure, but once you had constructed it, figured out how it would fold and still retain its integrity, all of that massive wiring that we saw earlier as well, I mean, must have been miles and miles of wiring that all has to be put in the right place just so that it can work properly. You've tested it, you've kept it clean and shiny, you've even got it inside the capsule that will go inside the rocket, but you've got to then get it to French Guiana, because that is where the launch pad was. That is where the Ariane rocket was. That's a mammoth journey, and that's before you've even hurtled it into space. How difficult was that?
Transporting something that large and this precise is an extremely intricate process that required a lot of detailed engineering.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at the Ariane rocket there with the miles of rail track that actually get it to the launch pad. That's in the Jupiter Center at the Guiana Space Center.
That's correct.
Wow, gosh.
But the way we transported that over the course of these 25 years, we've used airplanes to transport the telescope from one place to another. We've used special trucks that were made. We had a special container made to house the telescope in the observatory, and in the final leg, we had to take it by boat down the coast of the down the coast of California through the Panama Canal to French Guiana.
My goodness. I mean, you talk about the challenge of taking this incredibly delicate instrument and hurtling into space. But first of all, you've got to go through this very, very physical nature of getting it to where it's got to be launched from. And there it is, arriving in French Guiana at the port. And then it was shipped through, as you say, right through to the launch base there.
Right.
And that's where, as you say, it's the European Space Agency's base, is it there in French Guiana?
Yeah, well, it's I guess it's actually Ariane 5, the Ariane 5 base down there. But you know, CNES and the European Space Agency launched from there.
My goodness! And where were you there for the launch? You say you were very.
No, unfortunately, as much as I would have liked to have been there, I was up here in Mission Control because 12 hours after launch, we had our first critical maneuver, and I had to be up here for that.
Yeah. Because it looks like a rather nice place to go for the launch, but it must have been wonderful to see it. And a lot of your scientists and all of the others as well had a wonderful time actually watching the launch. We've got wonderful pictures of them applauding it. And as you were saying, it's such a spirit of cooperation from scientists from all over the world there. There we see European members of the team. Mission. So the pictures we're looking at now, is this in your mission control?
No, actually, the pictures that you're looking at now were in the Jupiter Center at French Guiana, Ariane's Jupiter Center.
Yeah, and that's outside with them watching it go up. Wonderful sight to see. I love some of your scientists, though. It doesn't matter how clever you are, you're still a bit nerdy. You wear your space socks. I noticed there are a lot of pictures of people wearing little bits of memorabilia, different sorts of space socks. And of course, we mustn't forget that you launched at Christmas. Was that a special choice, or was it just the right window in time?
No, it was. It wasn't so much a special choice. We were actually scheduled to launch 1 or 2 days before Christmas, and then due to various delays, one of which was weather down at the launch site. They had higher than wanted winds aloft. We had the opportunity to launch at Christmas. It was a good opportunity, and we took it.
It's interesting with the memorabilia of those socks and everything from jewelry to pins and badges. The launch of this space telescope and the job it's got to do really seems to have caught the public imagination, doesn't it?
Yeah, it has. And I think that, we owe that to Hubble and to its predecessors. Space telescopes have a neat history. We designed them to do a certain scientific job. But the truth is they find stuff that we never expected. And the prospect of finding something totally unexpected, totally new, opening up a whole new field of research has always excites everybody. To see a picture that is so ridiculously awesome that you could have never, ever predicted it, it captures the public imagination. Hubble has produced pictures that are, by definition, iconic. And I think that, we hold the prospect holds for us to do the same.
Oh, it is really exciting. In fact, even the astronaut crew aboard the International Space Station seem to be very excited about it. They've even put a sticker on their window.
I hadn't seen that. That's neat.
Apparently, that's the astronaut Christina Koch. She captured these photos of a sticker while she was on the International Space Station. It just shows that the excitement for it is global, certainly, or if not bigger. We've got lots and lots of questions from people. I want to ask one first, though. Who was James Webb?
He was the administrator of NASA when NASA put the first man on the moon.
And I gather that although Kennedy made the big speech about landing a man on the moon and getting him back, a lot of people think it's down to James Webb and the way he ran NASA that made that possible.
There's a lot of truth to that statement. So yes, setting the goal is one thing, but taking that goal and turning it into a reality, that's something else.
Now, I have lots more questions. Let's have a look here. These are difficult ones right here. The expectations. This is from Dale Dale Holt, who is an amateur astronomer, I think a very good one. The expectations for this telescope are unprecedented. Once commissioning is completed, how are the requests from astronomers and astrophysicists at the cutting edge going to be prioritized?
Oh, that's an easy one. Actually, there are different cycles. I think the cycles are on a yearly basis. Astronomers will forward proposals of their observations. It goes to committees led by experts in their field. They're narrowed down through an anonymous proposal process, so they don't the reviewers never know exactly who is the proposals from, and they are finally rated, evaluated, and selected for each year's cycle of observations through a competitive proposal process.
That's good to know. That basically means if a request is interesting enough, you will prioritize it.
Correct.
Somebody who's got in touch, Dr. Becky Kennedy, who is herself an astrophysicist, says, how does it feel for you to have been able to see such a huge project through from the earliest phases to seeing it actually launch? Even cathedral architects rarely get to see their finished works, but you really have.
I have to say that I consider myself extremely fortunate to have had that opportunity. I wanted to be an astronomer since I was 6 years old. Well, I came close enough, and I feel I've contributed, at least try to contribute to astronomy in my small way. But more than anything, I feel fortunate, and it is very, very gratifying to see things. I have cartoons here of some of the original concepts, and to compare that to the photograph of what actually flown is both gratifying and like I say, I consider myself extremely lucky.
She adds, in today's academic community, the model of the lone genius is very outdated in favor of international collaborative projects with hundreds or even thousands of contributors. How do you feel about this being such a project? And how do you feel about it being named after just one person?
Well, I'm not going to comment on the name because, frankly, I was kind of wondering. I would have bet that they would have named it after an astronomer, but that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm happy James Webb contributed to it, and that's fine. But as for international collaboration, there's no doubt that if you're going to be doing big science, if you're going to be doing the science that will change paradigms, international collaboration is the way you have to go. And in fact, I joke around. Well, it's not so much a joke, but when I give talks to various universities these days, I talk about my education at MIT, Columbia University, all that stuff. And I go, at the end of that, the one regret I had was that I never took a foreign language. And I really encourage, the future engineers, the future scientists, don't concentrate on learning one other language, because I do believe that international collaboration is the future of big science. We have to do it. And furthermore, after having 25, 30 trips to Paris and not speaking a lick of French, I consider that criminal. And I wish that I had taken French, and I wish that I had learned another language. So I believe wholeheartedly in the paradigm of international collaboration.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Colin on the south coast of England says, and I don't know how correct this is, but you'll put him right. This telescope is expected to fill in many knowledge gaps very quickly. It won't entertain the public like Hubble has, though, because it doesn't work in the visual wavelength. How are you going to keep the public engaged?
Well, I think, first of all, the images that you see will be images that will look just as appealing as the visible images. In fact, they may appear more appealing. For instance, the images will be in the infrared, but they will process that image to look as if your eye could see in the infrared.
Yeah.
And I think that for things like peering through dust clouds and seeing what actual protostars might actually look like, I think the public is going to find it very appealing. And I really believe that, as I said earlier in one of your earlier questions, there's going to be a lot of ooh and ahs to these images.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, we can't wait. James in London says, if you started all this 25 years ago, as you did, how has the advancement of all of our technology, the technology you work with, how has that changed your progress?
Well, in a sense, it hasn't, because unfortunately, at least this is my humble opinion, but as an aerospace engineer, you tend not to launch state of the art. You tend to launch state of the practice. The difference being, the new technologies, the technology that's new as of today. You wouldn't probably fly that because you want to make sure it's reliable before you fly it, because there's not going to be an engineer there to tune it and tweak it and do things like that. So you tend to launch technologies that you're relatively sure of, and that means they're state of the practice. So after 25 years, there's a certain point in the program that happened probably about 10 years ago in reality that said, okay, this is what we're flying. We're going to freeze it. It's done. Yeah, technology will advance, but we'll do that on the next mission, not on this one.
I see. So you were already working with technology you were familiar with, but the technology you were using was more advanced than that.
Oh, yeah. 25 years ago, it was very advanced. And over the course of the first couple of years, we did technology development, which means we made sure that the technology that we understood it, it was reliable, and we could trust it. And then probably about 10 years ago, things got frozen usually at a point we call the critical design review. And that's where we say, okay, technology will continue to advance, but we're going to stay with this design. We're going to see this through.
Because it works. Absolutely.
Right.
Okay, the next question, he asks another question, which I suppose reflects that, because we're all used to digital photography nowadays, and we even talk in pixels, those of us who are amateur at it anyway. He asks, how big is the file size of each individual image when it comes through?
Okay, well, I'll give that to you in pixels. If it's file sizes, that could involve a bunch of other things, bits that go into error determination and things like that. But the total number of pixels we have are 66.1 megapixels. And to put that in perspective, the Hubble had about 56 megapixels.
I see. And in fact, my next question is from somebody also in London who said, what's the biggest difference between Hubble and this telescope? What can this one do that Hubble can't? That's one of the things, I suppose. And the other answer is, as you've been explaining, is just looks further and deeper into space.
Right. Well, there's two differences. The first is that it's infrared, and Hubble was designed to be a visible and ultraviolet telescope. So we're seeing in an entirely different part of the spectrum from Hubble. And we're seeing in that part of the spectrum where the science is. We want to see the farthest galaxies there are in the universe. Now, those galaxies, when they emit their light, are probably emitting it in the blue or ultraviolet, very short wavelengths. Yeah. But when it's traveling through a universe that's been expanding for 13.7 billion years, that photon gets stretched out almost like a slinky. And by the time it comes to us, it's infrared light. So if you want to see those farthest galaxies, you look in the infrared. Hubble can't see very far into the infrared. And then finally, the obvious thing is we're about almost 7 times bigger than Hubble. And in the infrared, we are over 100, we're about 100 times more sensitive than Hubble. So by being bigger and being in the infrared, we will see farther back into space than Hubble is capable of.
Becky also asks, what are you looking forward to in the next phase of progress? Are there any science goals which really pique your interest?
Yeah, there's 3. And first, I've always had I'm an amateur cosmologist. I like cosmology. So I really would want to see the first galaxies that formed in our universe, the first stars. I don't think they're going to be like, they're not going to be normal stars like you and I are used to. These things, astronomers call them population 3 objects. And I bet you they're not going to be anything like the stars we're used to. So that's the first one. The second one, out of sheer vanity, I hope that we are the mission that detects the first biomarker on an exoplanet.
Oh,
that's arguable, but I really hope that's the truth. And then my third wish is that we find something so fantastically unexpected that we open up a whole new field of research. And like I said, history is any teacher. There's a good chance of that.
I mean, all of those things are completely mind-boggling, aren't they? And so exciting to have been part of. But yeah, like you say, the first biomarker to ever be found would be quite something. My goodness, I mean, I can't even imagine how incredible that would be, and actually earth-changing as well, because it would require us all to rethink our whole philosophy, maybe. But also, as you said, to maybe find something that man has never seen before.
Oh, that I mean, that's probably of the three of my three wishes. That's the more exciting of it, and you know, in my own vain style, I have my master's in physics, but if it opens up something new and totally unexpected, maybe at age 62, I can go back to grad school and get my PhD in a whole new field of research.
Yeah. It makes the next question, which is my last question, won't keep you much longer. Almost, I don't know. It's from Jim in Glasgow. He says, "How much has this all cost? Who provides the funds? And will it benefit us at all, us ordinary folk?"
Well, the overall cost is about $9 billion. And so, and you know, I don't know the split that comes from NASA and from ESA, but the whole cost is around $9 billion. And as for does it, you know, how will it affect the average ordinary, you know, person? Well, maybe it won't, maybe it will. But here's something that is just plain self-evident. You know, man, ever since we can remember, has always wondered what's there, what's beyond, and you know, the compulsion to explore is part of our nature. It's part of what drives us forward. Sometimes that exploration doesn't yield much. Sometimes it yields things that are incredible. And, you know, James Webb is just, it's another milestone in that compulsion to explore. So do I think it's going to contribute to the, you know, average ordinary person? Yeah, I absolutely, I would absolutely say, yeah. The time frame of that is to be determined, but certainly finding out what's farther than the last thing you saw is part of our nature. It always will be part of our nature, and it's the part that's propelled the human race the way it has. So, you know, it absolutely has to be done. And you know, James Webb is just another step in that overall process.
And you never know, do you, just what little boys and girls are going to be looking for those pictures and, you know, in awe of what it produces, and maybe feel spurred on to look beyond themselves. I mean, how old were you, did you say, when you first got interested in this sort of thing?
I was 6 years old.
Yeah. And what was it that made the difference? What was it that spurred you?
Well, let's see. I owe it to three. I had three great father figures of my father and two grandfathers. One was a pilot who took me flying with him when I was 11. In fact, he let me fly the plane when I was 11. That was kind of unique. I had a grandfather who was a machinist, who was an excellent engineer, just an excellent engineer, who used to, when he babysit for me, he'd shut me up by reading me from the book called The Universe by the Time Life series. And then my old man, who was a cab driver, as I was for a while, he started me to got me on the path to love mathematics when I was very young. And between the three of them, if I had turned out any other way, I think they would have been very disappointed.
My goodness, they would have been so proud of you. Did your father get to see you work on Hubble or anything like that?
He did. My father passed away about 15 years ago, but he saw me get to be the lead engineer on James Webb. And, you know, in my own way, I think the three of them were here when I launched. In fact, during the launch day, I brought memento from all three, just as good luck. And it's still sitting here with me.
Oh, good. Oh, good. I mean, that is amazing. I must say, my father was a scientist too, and he'd be proud of me just sitting here interviewing you, which is brilliant, isn't it? It all comes around again. You never know who you're going to inspire, I suppose, do you? It's been wonderful to talk to you about it today, and I do hope we can catch up again in the future, because everybody at Viking is so keen to follow the progress of the telescope and see how it does and wait for its first images. Thank you so much for being with us. Will you please give our best as well? I know they might not know us very well, but give our best as well to your whole team, because we really admire what they do. And it's just that you've given us such grounds for inspiration and travel. We love travel at Viking, so there you are. Thank you Thank you so much for joining us and explaining it in a way that I think we can all understand and be very enthusiastic about. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for having me.
Been brilliant, absolutely lovely. Right, that was wonderful. That gives you food for thought, doesn't it? So let's leave you with another look at that wonderful video, which briefly, of course, describes what the James Webb Telescope is all about, to the inspirational words of Carl Sagan. And let me also remind you that you can also follow the telescope's progress on this NASA page. Just hit the button on our page, and we at Viking TV will be catching up with Mike Menzel and his colleagues from time to time. I think we're all looking forward to seeing those first pictures where no one has ever seen before. Until next week, from me, Anne Diamond, and everybody here at Viking TV, stay safe and well. Goodbye.
We have uncovered wonders undreamt by our ancestors who first speculated on the nature of those wandering lights in the night sky. We've crossed the solar system and sent ships to the stars. But we continue to search. We can't help it. A central element of the human future lies far beyond the Earth. If we crave some cosmic purpose, then let us find ourselves a worthy goal.